So at any time people start talking about private servers like the hero's journey, someone always drops this one. It's fair use. Like that's supposed to be the end of the argument. But here's the thing. Fair use isn't some kind of magical shield. Just saying it doesn't protect you. It's not automatic, and it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with someone else's game just because you added a few tweaks. So there's a ton of confusion out there, not just about fair use, but also how it ties into things like the DMCA. Once you actually start digging into the court findings, you realize it's a lot messier than people think. So especially when we're talking about a custom EverQuest server with its own launcher, patch client, donation system, and game changes. We'll take a few minutes to break this down into the most normal terms that I can come up with, what fair use really is, when it works, when it doesn't, and what other laws come into play like the DMCA. What fair use is. Fair use is written into US copyright law under section 107, and it's not a free pass. It's actually a legal defense. This is something you argue after you've been accused of copyright infringement. It's not a preemptive strategy. It's a legal defense. So they look at four main things. Basically, one, why are you using it? Did you transform the original? Are you doing it for profit or not? Two, what kind of work is it? Fiction, art, and games all get stronger protections, say, than like raw facts. Three, how much of it have you used? Did you just take a bit or most of it? And was it the important part? And four, does it hurt the market for the original? Would people use your version instead? You guys can already look at those four things, and you can probably guess for yourself whether or not THJ is fair use without me having to say anything else. So all four of these things, they get weighed together. So there isn't a magic formula. The more you match the original in look, feel, purpose, the harder it gets to claim fair use. This is from Campbell v. Acuff-Rose music. So the four statutory factors are to be explored and the results weighed together in light of the purposes of copyright. Everything together. So here's when fair use does work because it is a valid defense, but none of them are from private servers. So like in Campbell versus Acuff-Rose, that was the 2 Live Crew parody of Oh Pretty Woman. So the Supreme Court sided with them because the parody had a different purpose. It wasn't trying to replace the original. Or take Authors Guild versus Google. Google scanned a bunch of books and only showed little snippets to help people search. The court said that was transformative. It wasn't just copying, it added new value. So even in games, Sega versus Accolade case, Accolade reverse engineered Sega system to make compatible games. The court said it was fair use because the goal wasn't to copy the games, it was to understand how they worked. In all of those cases, fair use worked because the use changed meaning or function. It didn't just recreate the whole original, and it didn't compete directly in the same market. So if we apply those four factors to THJ, as some of you already did after I probably read the four factors, server uses the real EverQuest client. It runs off the same basic structure. The zones, classes, UI, even if they're tweaked, are mostly the same. Players log in and play a full version of the game, and there are donations that can affect gameplay. Doesn't matter what part of gameplay they affect or how much. We've already had that argument. So the purpose, going over in one, it's similar. It's still an MMORPG where you level, loot, and raid. And then two, the work itself, it's super creative. This isn't some list of facts, it's a whole fantasy world. Three, how much is it used? Pretty much all of it. And then factor four, market impact. Even if it's free, people might play it instead of official EverQuest. So that's not even close to lining up with things where fair use wins that. So then I had someone say like, what about, it's public domain or abandonment. So a lot of people will say like the assets are old, shouldn't it be public domain by now? And not really. The corporate copyright in the US lasts 95 years. EverQuest came out in 1999. So unless someone at Daybreak said we're officially releasing this back into public domain, those assets are still protected at least until 2094. Another thing people like to bring up is Project 1999. Well, Daybreak let them operate, so maybe they gave up the copyright. Nope again. Giving one group permission does not mean everyone gets a free pass. That's called selective licensing, and courts have said that's perfectly legal. To find abandonment, the copyright owner must clearly and expressly relinquish rights to the public at large. This came from MicroStar versus FormGen Incorporated. So unless Daybreak comes out and says, we're giving up our rights and anyone can use EQ content, it's not abandonment. where does the DMCA come into play? A lot of people don't realize that like the copyright part and the DMCA are like completely separate. Even if you pass the fair use for the copyright infringement, you can still get hit by the DMCA. If you are using something fairly by those 4 conditions, it does not supersede the DMCA. It's actually the opposite. Even if you argue fair use, this is the second law that's often more important in these cases, the DMCA, which we talked about in another video with its mandate for minimum fines. That's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and this is section 1201. It says it's illegal to get around digital protections, things like encrypted clients, login servers, or anti-piracy checks. So even if you're not copying content, just bypassing the login system to run a private server, that can be a violation. And courts have made it clear fair use doesn't excuse DMCA violations. So as you go back to this guy's comment, he's acting like, if they were to prove fair use, that somehow it, voids them from DMCA, and that's not the case. So maybe that guy doesn't understand how DMCA works, which is strange with, how we have Google these days. You can pretty much figure out what it's all about yourself. So this was another case. This is Universal versus Reimerdes, if I'm saying that right. And just briefly, the DMCA contains no exception for fair use. The posting of DECSS was unlawful, even if done for a lawful purpose. So the DECSS was one of the first free computer programs that was capable of decrypting commercially produced DVD video discs. And this also from Blizzard v. Jung, a defendant's circumvention of technological measure that controls access to a copyrighted work violates the DMCA regardless of any fair use justification. Basically, to just wrap this up, it's not that fair use never applies, it just has to hit all the right marks. New purpose, new meaning, minimal copy, and no market impact. And you can see THJ fails on almost every single one of those. And even then, if the project breaks the DMCA, which they have a login server, we're logging to a private server, it bypasses official Daybreak servers, the fair use argument might not even make it to court. So that's why this stuff usually gets shut down so fast. It's not always about intent, it's about how the law is written. So whether you think it's fair or not, this is what we've got. And when it comes to something like the hero's journey, that's the legal terrain it's operating in. Whether the devs or the players realize it or not, or like it or not, like I would love for the hero's journey to continue on. I would like to keep playing. Unfortunately, the scenario that we've all been put in as supporters and players, and the devs put themselves in, isn't very favorable. I just wish I could go back to that original brainstorm meeting that they had and be like, a fly on the wall and figure out what they were thinking, when they're talking about forming the LLC before they launched the project, I'm assuming. And if they ever thought that maybe like, hey, if this gets too popular, this gets too big, we might get sued. Like I want to be at that original meeting of the minds to do this, because to put this type of time into, creating this and coding this server and being basically like the admins we've always wanted for EverQuest, and being very responsive and putting in a lot of changes. Like I said, a lot of the changes I even suggested in my videos, they got put in. And I think that's really cool. And I wish that's how most games were. And so they did all that part right, except I don't know, maybe they didn't think they were going to be this big. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how they got in this scenario, especially because the developers are smart people. This should have been probably something somebody should have brought up along the ways, but that covers fair use, covers public domain. For some reason, people seem to have forgotten that I am actually a THJ supporter, and that I hope that a version like THJ of EverQuest becomes like some type of official version, or somehow they're allowed to continue. People just want to, I don't know, ignore reality, I guess. And I get comments like this all the time. I edited out this guy's name, but there's zero chance you're a lawyer. So right off the bat, it's like you didn't even watch any of my videos, like hardly at all. Like I think I've pretty much made clear that I'm not a lawyer on several cases. What you could say is that I'm a legal analyst, because lawyers have clients and they're allowed to give legal advice. Legal analysts, on the other hand, which was the capacity I worked in when I worked for my business, they just analyze. I can't have any clients, can't give any advice. The only thing I can do is look at legal stuff and defend myself. You don't need to be a lawyer. In fact, a lot of you watching this could understand legal documents. And once you get some of the terms down and how they're written and how the law works, it's not so hard to analyze it. It's like looking at a spreadsheet with numbers in it. And everything in these videos obviously is opinions. That's what analysts have, all different opinions. Sometimes it's a general consensus between the analysts. Right off the bat, I get comments like this all the time. So my understanding of the DMCA is not only incorrect, it would be malpractice again. So he says, your understanding of the DMCA is not only incorrect, it would be malpractice. Obviously, he didn't watch your videos. So your facts about THJ are taking an assumption, adding a few layers, and then calling it fact. That's a fallacy you keep falling into. The only thing you've gotten correct is competing either DBG, I think he means THJ competing with DBG. They do that, but it could be argued that it's allowed under fair use, something you don't discuss at all. So I'm more than happy to respond to comments. I do hope that people actually watch the videos or point out anything specific. Even the guy that was mad that he watched a 27-minute video and had a problem with me saying like that they're gonna take the legal fund money and run. A figure of speech, just hung on that one sentence out of 27 minutes. But at least I felt like he watched the video and he had something to complain about. I have no clue what this guy's talking about, but he did mention fair use. If you get on there and run a rant like this guy did, I don't think that helps the discussion along. You kind of look stupid, I guess. At least point something out in the video, watch the video, I guess, and you can have your opinions. Sometimes I'll even agree or we'll find a compromise through the comments. But one thing that's not going to help us out having these discussions about the hero's journey is just this type of stuff. I would have to guess, and he never replied. I asked him to clarify any of the points. I mean, even just taking something like my understanding of the DMCA is not only incorrect, it'd be I mean, why not just grab the part that they didn't like I said about the DMCA and say, hey, this isn't actually how it works, or something about what I said about the DMCA. And then who knows what he's talking about with facts. I mean, most of the stuff except like case law is opinion or stuff that's like well known or stuff that's out there. And then he openly appears to admit that they're competing with DBG, it looks like, and that they're somehow allowed to argue that it's allowed under fair use, which I don't discuss at all, but we just went over fair use. Like, you can't compete in fair use. It's not fair use if you're competing with the original market. And he basically contradicts himself in that end sentence. So you get comments like this, and that's fine. One good thing is that he did mention fair use, so I got to make a video out of it. And a lot of people have, like, I've heard the public domain argument before because it's on, the files are out there on GitHub or whatever like that. But like, you can't go to like a thrift store and get like a DVD for free. And then because it was out there and open for free, you can't just take it back and like show it in a theater and start selling stuff in the theater. You can't make that like publicly available where you have a potential to profit. I don't even think you can just show it generally and allow people to just come in and watch the movie. So I'm just not following some of the understanding behind this fair use and other arguments people make. Like, you can't just take over someone's land, build a house, and say that you're using it better. Like, it's their property. And that's exactly what's happening here. Is this is their property. As I said in one of the previous videos, they're in control of whether or not this game lives or dies. That's up to them, not up to us. And while I hope something gets worked out, like I said, it does not look very favorable conditions, but I'm hoping to learn more in the response that THJ has soon to Daybreak. So stay tuned. I'll keep you updated. We'll get through this. And as always, thanks for watching, and check out one of these two videos.